1992, I was selected as part of a national crew to sail to Rarotonga for the South Pacific Arts Festival. Hector Busby had created Te Aurere, the canoe that we sailed on. In Rarotonga I met Sir Thomas Davis and was fortunate enough to be invited to learn under him. And in 1995, Te Auotonga, the Cook Island Voyaging canoe, was created in the form of a Waka Hourua, which is a double-hulled voyaging canoe, Te Pairua model. So the model of this particular canoe came from a little place called Whakarawhiti in the Tuamutus. When it came to building our waka for the Tairāwhiti, in between that time and sailing on Te Aotonga, I was invited to build a fleet of voyaging canoes by a philanthropist from Okeanis Foundation, and we were able to build 7 of these waka as a fleet over a period of a year, and we sailed that fleet from Aotearoa to San Francisco and then around the Pacific, accumulating something like 30,000 nautical miles each. So once again convinced at the sturdiness and seaworthiness of this particular type of waka. So when it came to Salthouse Boat Builders building our waka, we had the moulds there that belonged to Okeanis and were loaned to us to be used for our waka. Heke Mai Busby and our kaumatua of voyaging throughout the Pacific agreed to do the blessing. We all had our hands on the mould, and that connected us to the waka, to the build, and eventually to our waka Tairāwhiti.
In those big black bundles there, that's a boat. There's 2 hulls in there. They come prefabricated, so every boat is the same. A laminate has been put down on a male mould, foam core and another laminate with resin transfers put on top. A vacuum bag has been placed over the top and it's been sucked down, creating a vacuum. We've then gone through, punctured the bag with 130 odd pipes, which all have to be made airtight again so that they hold a vacuum. Plumbed up to a mile of hoses and buckets, and then we start off at the bottom, turn the taps on and slowly let the resin be drawn into it. The resin doesn't know that it's going uphill or downhill, it's just merely going into a void. 600 kilos of resin. Anybody who looks at 44-gallon drums, 3 drums of resin. It's not suitable for every application. There is a lot of plumbing time and setting up for it. We can have 4 people can lay up all the dry fibre over the course of a week, and then in this space of 3 hours with 13, 14 people, we can infuse it. Probably one of the really nice things about doing this style of resin infusion, you get a very solid laminate. Because it's drawn down, consolidated with 1 atmosphere of pressure, and the resin goes into it, effectively there are no voids and there is no air inside the laminate. Absolutely ideal for a boat being put to survey for chartering and use as a commercial vessel.
Progressing in a whole lot of different areas. We've got components being made all over the workshop. 1 hull completed with a lot of the structure already inside, and a lot of the components that will go on the canoe at the end are actually made. The masts and spars, which are along here, they're being varnished, and the cross beams are in the shed downstairs. They're in varnish and paint. And the deck house or the whare, that's ready for the roof to go on. And a lot of small components that go on the rig or around the boat are also made. The centre boards and centre cases are done. We've done all the groundwork for ordering the engines. The fuel tanks are underway and most of the decisions are made. That's the main thing.
It's a real logistic time frame where you have to have one component to fit into the next component when that component's ready, otherwise you'll sort of stop. So we'll be just carrying on with bulkheads, centre cases, centre boards, all that sort of thing, and getting them all ready so when the hulls pop off the mould, everything goes in.
So while I was learning from Papa Tom, he instilled in me very strongly the concept you shouldn't go far from where the ancestors left off in terms of the design. He would always say to me, the ancestors got it right. So I was very aware of that right throughout the process of the build, and just taking advantage of the design that the ancestors had created and using modern technology for our new generation canoes by using modern materials like fiberglass for the hulls and all the interiors. But then you look at the upper decks and it just looks like a normal traditional canoe. But there are features of old boat building skills too, like the use of brass pins to hold the booms together. As you look around and you look at it in more detail, the amount of workmanship that goes into the building of our hull waka, you have a look at the cabin, at all of the different components, and you'll see a beautiful blend of traditional Polynesian design mixed with modern technology, mixed with old European techniques for boat building. It's a new generation waka, built in the design of our ancestors, but taking advantage of the best materials that we have available to us today. Between Mark, Matt and myself, we were able to capture designs that represent our rohe of the Tairāwhiti, our area of the Tairāwhiti, in a way that is exciting, is traditional, and captures all of our philosophies. So to get our crew up to speed, to actually sail on Tairāwhiti, we started by introducing them to the concept of the theory of sailing and the theory of safety at sea. Through Coast Guard, we were able to offer day skipper courses, which was chart work, general sort of knowledge of running a small boat or a vessel at sea, and learning about the safety aspects that you have to be aware of, communication, navigation, all of those sorts of aspects that come with doing a day skipper's course that give people a basic grounding. So with all the different materials that we were using on the Waka Hourua, Tairāwhiti, I felt that we really needed a local timber, and I settled on the concept of a putukawa. Luckily, people from Hawaii up the east coast were able to provide us with some beautiful putukawa, as well as people from Tokumaru Bay through Bay Riddell. We were able to secure these timbers to put on the bow of our waka. So really important feature, because the bow is the first part of the waka that breaks the water as you're voyaging. Once we had secured them, then we had to transport them to Auckland, and then we had to shape them. So quite an arduous task shaping these putukawa, because putukawa grows over a long period of time and is very, very hard and very dense. And because we didn't get all of the pieces from one place, we put various pieces of modi from those places into that bow section so that they're included as a part of our waka. And so shaping it right through from that rectangular piece of timber right through to actually placing it on the bow was quite a lot of work.
The cross beams, there's many of them rather than just 2 or 4, which you'd find in a modern craft. So there's a lot of load sharing. Those multiple beams also provide a surface to screw the deck to, but they're all individually lashed with a special handed down system that we still use, and after thousands of miles they don't seem to come loose. And put the thing together so it could be maintained, so as parts wore out you could slide them out and replace them over time, rather than the whole boat just having a life, could be ongoing, like an old Land Rover.
You couldn't actually put the beams on and bolt them to the boat and expect it all to hold together. The lashing actually acts almost like a spring or a release for them, because the boats do move and they move separately over the waves and so forth. And if you try and make them too rigid, you'll end up breaking the beams or something. You'll end up breaking them off the boat. So that's where the different technology comes into. You've bought a catamaran nowadays, it's all very, very strong through the middle of the boat to try and hold it all together. With these ones are two hulls that are just lashed together and allowed to move.
The stage that we're at now, all the both of the hulls have been joined together. They've all been lashed together in traditional lashing style of voyaging canoes. Waka Hourua, the cabin's on. All of the components on the inside have been are being placed in there now, finishing up the bunks or the fiddles, all of the motor components, the vents, the deck boxes have been placed on board, the solar panels for the electrics have been placed on board, and the cradle to hold the safety boat is now in place. We've picked up on things that could be improved on all of the other 8, and we've made those improvements to our waka. So we still need to test it with sea trials and so forth, but what we've tried to do with this one is make it as child-proof as possible, because we're going to be using it as a floating classroom. So there's little things like, instead of having 2 safety ropes on the stanchions, we've gone with 3. We've got the cultural designs to go on the side and the sails that are being produced as we speak. So everything is really ready to go. About a week before the launch, our waka will be taken outside the boat shed and ready for launch. All of the rigging will be done, and then once we're at that stage, we've pretty much got a complete waka.
So we now have our Waka Hourua Tairāwhiti complete, ready for the launch. So quite an exciting time, but also very nervous time. Everybody gathers and we're waiting for the tide to come up to give us enough water to actually launch. And luckily the tide is conforming with us in terms of the time of the day, in terms of the flights and so forth that people needed to catch to be in Auckland, and so everything is in tune. Making sure that all of the right people are there, getting them from Gisborne up to Auckland to be there for the blessing, getting Heke down to the waka to give the final blessing before the launch, give recognition to the traditional aspects of the launch, obviously the karakia, acknowledging people, and then of course entering the water. Wow, what a special time. Running down the slipway into the water and Tairāwhiti, breathing in the water, breathing in Tangaroa for the first time. Very exciting, very humbling, but at the same time very fulfilling. So we have to comply with maritime law in terms of Maritime New Zealand, and making sure that everything on board the waka is safe. So with the sea trials we test out the motor, make sure that the motor is working properly, making sure that the engines are functioning correctly, making sure that everything is working as it should, because it's a brand new vessel. Nothing has been tested before. Everything's been put in place, but you don't know how it's going to go. And because our waka is a very bespoke waka, it's the only waka of its kind in terms of all of the technology that's gone into it. It differs from some of the other waka that are being produced in small ways. So those small ways make our waka a bespoke, a one-off by itself. So just testing all of those things, we were very pleased with the outcome of those, but then all of that means nothing if you can't pass your survey. So we had Robin Williams come down and do our survey. Robin is an expert surveyor, and he's surveyed all of the waka in Aotearoa, and Robin has come down and tested us and made sure through his checklist that we comply with everything. So we've carried out our sea trials, we're happy with the way that everything's performing. Now it's a matter of sailing our waka home. Preparing all of the food, giving people delegated authority in terms of their position on the waka, the cooks, the sailors, the watch captains, getting all of that organised, making sure that our charts were all in place, making sure that we had done all of our preparatory work correctly, making sure that we were signed off with Maritime New Zealand, making sure that we had our insurance cover, all those little details, making sure that everything was absolutely correct and we were ready to go. But at the end of the day, doing what our ancestors did, exploring, discovering and settling, and here we were sailing from Auckland down to Tairāwhiti, down to Gisborne, on a very small voyage in comparison, but a very important voyage. Coming in for the first time on our waka to Tairāwhiti, to Gisborne, and actually I did have a look over at the canoe prow that I was carving in 1990 and just remembering that whole journey, that 27-year journey of securing a waka for the Tairāwhiti and giving thanks to the Tairāwhiti Voyaging Trust and everybody else who had helped along the way to make this happen. It was a joint venture, it was a community effort, it was a voyaging community effort.
Your voices go out to the world and to your friends and to your family that Tairāwhiti is in there.
To be involved in something that represents our ancestors, that represents where we come from, that represents who we are, that represents our future in terms of teaching our young ones our voyaging history, or anybody who's interested in learning about our voyaging history, which is extensive, goes back 7,000 years, and to be able to share that with people is very, very, very exciting and very fulfilling.